He's on Zoom. Okay.
Maxwell. You'll see them all in a moment.
Oh, sorry. I thought we say he was gonna be here. Sorry, never mind.
Yes, that's Dave.
Hey, Dave.
There he is.
The recording is on.
Meeting is being recorded. I'd like to open the meeting, or make a motion to open the meeting.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The notice is hereby given that the zoning board of appeals, the village of Tuxedo Park will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, February 7th at the village hall to hear the following application. The application of Sophia Deliner, 66 Summit Road, Tuxedo Park, New York, tax map number 104-1-11.1, seeking relief from the following sections of the village of Tuxedo Park's zoning code. Section 100-18A, fences, front yard where maximum height of fence in the front yard shall not exceed 4 feet and 8 feet is being proposed. Section 100-18A, fences side and rear yard where maximum permitted height of fence in the side and rear yards may not exceed 6 feet and 8 feet is being proposed. Section 100-18A, fences where setback from road, East Summit Road in this application shall be no closer than 5 feet and 2 feet is being proposed. Do we have proof of mailings?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Excuse me, John, my lawyer's in the waiting room still, Sarcone, Mr. Sarcone, as is Mr. Lynch, I think. No, Ryan Lynch, head of the building.
Jake, I thought that the 5 feet was not being asked for as in terms of variance, versus the 2 feet.
If I may, the plan does not show it as 5 feet, but they have subsequently notified me that they are planning on staying 5 feet off the road. But the plan shows it.
Understood.
So, just so we're all clear.
So the plan would have to be
The
correct.
plan would have to just be modified.
You have the proof of mailings then, John?
Yes, we have, proof that they were sent out. And, we have a cover letter here dated February 7th, that there's 11 white certified mailings and 5 green certified receipts. 3, 6. The Schreibers received this. Claudio Guazzoni received it. Gavin Maxwell, Martin Pomp. Tuxedo Park Properties. This is, I believe, the Ronconi property just to the left of the driveway as you approach it.
Okay, who is going to present for the applicant?
Good evening, Chairman. My name is Michael Sheridan. I'm in the Snyder.
Okay.
Good evening. I do have one thing to add to your record, not to complicate it anymore. Regarding the response to the letter that we received yesterday from neighboring property owners, attorney, and Mr. Sarcone. I just wanted to make sure that it's part of the record.
You have copies for the board?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Did you?
You have not received this one, John, yet?
Nobody has received this yet. It's not off the picture, I would say.
So is an extra copy?
I can see, I have one copy from this. I can get extra copies or email to John. Email copies.
Yeah, counsel, you could just email it to me. I'll take a look at it tomorrow.
For the record, who was that?
John Sarcone, I'm on the Zoom, calling in from Raleigh, North Carolina on college visits with my kids.
That's okay. We can see your phone number. We just didn't know who was speaking. That's all.
That's me. Thank you. Good evening.
And Mr. Lynch, you can make the same request as well.
Well, I'd love to be able to see it before they finish the presentation, but if it can't be done, it can't be done.
Well, no one has seen it. The board hasn't seen it.
We haven't seen it.
So
At least before the board makes a decision, if we can see it and respond to it, that's all we ask.
again, not, again, my name is Michael Sheridan, attorney from Estelle Snyder, and we're here tonight. Again, I say complicate this matter because this matter really isn't as complicated as it appears to be, and as the numerous amounts of documents that you received in connection with this make it seem. Even the clarification that the letter that I just submitted to you sort of tries to get across is that the application before you is an application for an area variance. The area variance, as was listed, as was mentioned by the chairman at the beginning of the meeting, is for 8-foot fence where a 4-foot fence is allowed in the front of the property, and an 8-foot fence where a 6-foot fence is allowed in the rear of the side of the property. As was mentioned, the setback, my client, Ms. Dellner, agreed to meet the setback in the small area on her property where it needs to be 5 feet. So the only two issues are you going to approve Ms. Dellner to have the area variance for an 8-foot fence where a 4-foot fence is required, or a 6-foot fence where an 8-foot fence is required? That's what's before this board. That's what this board needs to decide. This board does not need to decide if there is an easement on the property saying one thing. This board does not need to decide if there is a restriction on the property saying another thing. That is not for this board to make a determination, because this board does not have the knowledge, nor should you, of every neighboring property or every property, what's in their deeds going back to, I think, 1893 was the latest thing that we received. That's not for this board to make that determination. That is a private property dispute between my client and the neighboring property owner that will either resolve itself or be resolved in some different venue, not here in front of the ZBA tonight. Tonight, again, we're here for a fence. We're here for a limited area variance of 2 feet on the rear yard and the side yard, and 4 feet in the front yard. I think we made it clear in our initial filing that the front yard, where the 4 feet variance is going to be, the front yard, as designated by the building inspector, is on her common driveway. So it's not even on a street. If you read your code, the reason why the code appears to have a lower fence height in the front yard is because the front yard traditionally on most homes, and probably most homes in Tuxedo Park, the front yard is adjacent to a street. So they don't want to see a larger fence in the street. That's why they have a 4-foot. That's my understanding why they would have a 4-foot in the front and a 6-foot on the side and the rear. That happens in many municipalities all across the place. But Ms. Dellner's property is unique in that it's sort of landlocked. It's not really on a street. Her front yard, as designated by the building inspector, is on her common driveway. It's not a road. It's not a street. It's her driveway. The area in her front yard where the fence is going to be is predominantly only seen by her when she drives up to her property, and not by anybody passing by on any of the streets in the area. So going from 4 feet to 8 feet there really isn't sort of defeating the purpose of the code, because nobody's really going to see that portion of the fence. As far as the side yard and the rear yard, going from 6 feet to 8 feet, it's only 2 additional feet. I doubt anybody from any sort of distance will be able to tell that 2 additional feet. Now the question is, why does Ms. Dellner need the 8 feet? Well, she needs the 8 feet, as we've mentioned in the numerous filings that we've given, because she's attempting to deer off her property. And deer, as I'm sure you all know, is an issue not only everywhere, but I'm sure in this area that is heavily wooded and surrounded by heavily wooded areas, I'm sure that the deer are pretty prevalent in this area. She wants to be able to plant things in her yard, in her garden. She wants to be able to have landscaping, and she wants to be able to make sure it remains, does not get eaten and removed by the deer, which are invasive. Your code allows for fences. Your code allows for 6-foot fences, 4 fences. Interestingly, your code allows for 2.5-foot fences with, it appears, not any sort of requirements of building, even building permits or applications here. But Ms. Eleanor, again, wants to put a fence in, but wants to keep the deer out. In order to keep the deer out, needs to be an 8-foot fence. We've provided information from the DEC showing that they can jump up to 8-foot fences. However, Ms. Eleanor's fence installer, who has dealt with deer fences before, says that really 7 feet is kind of the peak where they sort of jump over, so an 8-foot fence should solve the problem. That is where we came to an 8-foot fence. It's the minimum height that Ms. Eleanor has found through her interactions with the fence installer who has dealt with deer before. The minimum height necessary to keep the deer out of her yard. That's what we're looking for. Merely those 2 area variances. That's what we're here for tonight, and that's what we hope you make a decision on.
We see correct in that that is the issue and not the other items.
Look, the village, BZA can look at more than just the application specific. In other words, you're going to be going through the 5 considerations to the extent that the easements might or might not affect that. I really don't know. I would want some time to just look into that issue. As a general rule, you are limited to what you're being asked. However, in the broader sense, you're also looking at the impacts to the neighborhoods, the impacts to the neighbors, etc. So to give you a definitive legal answer on that, I'd have to do a little more research. Okay?
And I think we did go through the 5 factors, and we can certainly go through them if, again, if you like, that it's not impacting, first of all, it's not impacting the character of the neighborhood. There's the first factor under 712B, the New York State Village Law. Character of the neighborhood, we've submitted numerous pictures from around the village of Tuxedo Park showing fences of similar size. Some are even more intrusive than the one that's proposed here, which is just a wire fence, just to keep the deer out. The fence will allow light and air to go through it. It's not going to be something that you see on some properties like a wall or a board-on-board fence. It's going to be something that everybody's able to see through, and presumably as you get more of a distance, you're going to see less and less of it. So it's really not going to change the character of the neighborhood. Number 2, can a benefit be achieved by any other method? There's really no other method than the request, which is the higher fence to keep the deer out. And that's something that not only the DEC has indicated that deer can jump to a specific height, but also the professional fence installer that Ms. Eleanor has retained that agrees that even the DEC might be correct, but he's thinking we can get away with just, Ms. Eleanor could just get away with the 8-foot fence. The nature of the variance, it's not substantial. Again, it's 6 foot, 6 foot in rear and back. We wouldn't need to get any variance. If you're doing a 6-foot fence, it's only asking for an 8-foot fence in the rear and back. The front, although it seems more substantial because it's 4 to an 8, again, that front yard, the front of her yard is on that common driveway. She's really the only one at that point on the common driveway that's there, so she's going to be the only one seeing it. It's not something that's going to be seen from the street or Summit Drive, or if it is, it's not going to look like a front yard fence. Effect on the neighborhood, it's going to have no environmental impact effect on the neighborhood because, again, it's a fence. There are fences all over Tuxedo Park. It's not going to produce odor, smoke, fumes, noise, vibrations, other noxious issues. And again, since it's a wire fence, there's going to be these gigantic holes in it, not big enough for deer to get through, but big enough for air and light and everything else to get through. And the difficulty is not self-created. As I mentioned earlier, I'm sure you're all aware the deer are everywhere, and they're probably more pervasive here than in other parts because of your proximity to the woods and the parks around you, such that they would come into her yard and eat all of her landscaping, that she wants to prevent that from happening, which is why she's requesting this fence.
Quick question, Senator. Do we have a picture of what the fence looks like?
Yes.
I didn't see it.
It
I may have missed it.
Yeah, it is in the
First
application.
Isn't it the first one?
Yes.
Packet?
Yes.
Well, I got a lot of information.
And is that something the
It's that one, correct?
BAR would approve, the design of the fence? Is that right, Jake? In terms of if they go forward,
No, that would be
does it go to the
Oh,
BAR?
metal,
for
metal
approval
pole
of the
and then
design of the
there's
fence?
wiring here, but again, it's not allowed.
I'm wide open.
And this is,
It's a metal pole. I think the metal poles were predominantly like this.
No, obviously you put different number of pictures, okay? And, you know, of course, we look at these pictures and, you know, a lot of them are fences going into somebody's property and, some of them are deer fences and a lot of the deer fences were done during the time when the village allowed deer fences, all right? And that goes back to 2006, and that was for a period of 5 years. And then it was a local law that was established at that point in time that has now gone off the books.
so they would be existing non-conforming. Do you have anything to say about this?
Yes, I will say that the majority of the pictures of the hard, the metal fences and the gates and pillars, you know, were approved by the Board of Architecture review over a period of time. And there are a number of the nylon netting that you saw in those pictures, that were either, done before 2007, or maybe illegal and were constructed after that.
Were there any, variances issued for any of these fences?
Yes, I think there were some variances issued for some of the gates as they did exceed, you know, 14.
So the gates.
Yeah.
But not the deer fences never
Right.
came before the BZA.
Correct.
They were the BZA never approved deer fences before.
And I will say, code years ago did allow for a secondary fence. And it reads here, no person who shall erect or cause to be erected a secondary fence shall be required to obtain a permit of any kind from the building inspector or board of architectural review. And it goes on to say that a secondary fence shall only be constructed of black plastic mesh material of a type approved by the board of trustees and should be erected on thin black metal stakes. That goes on. And that's most of the mesh that you had provided us pictures of.
And but that was in effect prior.
Yes.
Yeah, that I think was from 2007 for 5 years, basically.
I still think that goes to the five factors that your neighborhood, your village does have many of these types of fences around. So it's not changing the character of the neighborhood. It's not changing the character of the village. It's consistent with what exists currently in the village. And we're, again, allowed to have 6 feet, only looking for the 2 feet in the rear and the back. And I think it can't be achieved by any other method. It's not self-created. It's not going to impact the environment. Nature of the variance is not that great for the 2 feet, for the majority of the fence. And again, the fact that these fences existed from whatever, certainly if there were a law that allowed her to do it now, that would be easier than perhaps coming here and requesting a variance. But because those fences existed, whether they existed under a law, whether from 2006 or some sort of secondary fence law, the character of the neighborhood of your village shows that these fences are something that people have, and probably with good reason, to keep the deer out.
I think the issue though, and you've really reached the heart of it, is that the law was changed. So these fences were allowed, and then the Board of Trustees decided that they didn't want them anymore. So there are residual pre-existing non-conforming fences. There were BZA variances for gates of height variances, but it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison, and especially given the fact that the Board of Trustees has indicated by passing a law to but to do away with the fences. So I think the board, it's not like you're here for variance because the law was changed.
No, but just to clarify something, fences are allowed. The board, the town did not come in and say fences are not allowed. In fact, we're only here because, again, there's a 4-foot fence and a 6-foot fence that Ms. Delaner could put on her property tomorrow. That's allowed by that law. They'd have to go to the ARB, but she could go to the ARB, hopefully get approval from them with whatever design, and she could put that fence up tomorrow. It's not that fences aren't allowed in the village. Fences are definitely allowed. And in the code, she could put up a 2.5-foot fence, and I believe, and perhaps the building inspector can correct me, she could put that up without getting any approvals from anybody. I believe the code says it doesn't even require a building permit. So the code and the board and the village did not say that fences are not allowed. We're not here trying to put in a fence that nobody wants, that is not allowed in the village. We're trying to put in a fence that's allowed everywhere in the village. We're just trying to put in one that's a little taller because we have information that the deer can jump a 6-foot fence, which is allowed, and a 4-foot fence, which is allowed in the front. That's what we're here for. Fences are allowed. It's just not the height that we're going for that's allowed.
That's what was changed. So.
I don't know that that's what was changed, because I don't know
Allowed,
what the 2006 local law said. I'm not sure what that law said.
It basically allowed deer fencing is what, you know.
So deer fencing is by its nature at least 8 feet.
Right.
Then, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like the pictures that you sent, many of them all of them pre-existing, seem to be 8 feet. Yeah. So the law was changed and the height was changed. So deer fencing is not allowed. So, I mean, we can go back and research exactly, through all the local laws, and I can certainly do that. I'm just pointing out that to the board that there does appear to be an intent by the Board of Trustees to limit the height of the fences. Not that they're not allowed, you're absolutely correct about that, but to limit the height. But so really it's up to the board now if you have any questions.
Well, do we, at this point in time, as far, I mean, one of the issues that I have is that, the BZA has never approved an 8-foot fence on a perimeter property, okay? Has never happened, okay? So, what we have approved is fencing in, gates and maybe the front of a property, but not surrounding a whole property, a perimeter fence, all right? And that's, a problem that we would have as a precedent here. That's, an issue.
So you're saying you've approved 8-foot gates in front?
Yes.
And they're,
We have,
8-foot gates?
I think
I
that
think
at
we've
the,
granted some
at the entrance to somebody's house, okay, like a swinging gate, all right, I believe that there's some, but not a perimeter gate.
I'm not aware that you've ever done that. I do know that height variances have been granted for gates I think you just granted one.
At our last meeting, we approved an
right, right.
8-foot section of wall to a small section.
Very small area in the front of the whole property. It wasn't surrounding the whole property.
right, but I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the reason why it's a 4-foot, the reason why we need a 4-foot to 8-foot variance in the front of the property is because the area in the front of the property traditionally is usually on the street. So you granted the 4-foot to 8-foot fence, gates, wall, whatever you've done on the street side of the property that everybody drives by. So now you have this high 8-foot fence that, to me, does change the character of the neighborhood as you're driving by on the street. This is not that. This is not going to change visually what you're seeing from the street. This is all on a property that is back in the back of a common drive, not facing a street. The front yard of this property, again, faces our common drive. So this is even less of an impact than what you're saying about these gates, because these gates, I'm sure you could drive by tonight and see the 8-foot or however tall gate that has been approved right on the street. This you will not see. This is as far as number one goes in changing the character of the neighborhood, this will have less of an impact on the character of the neighborhood than that gate.
I understand what you're saying about the street, but it does say the neighborhood, not the neighborhood from the street. This is a neighborhood, and it will be up to this board to decide whether or not a perimeter fence at 8 feet would change the neighborhood or the character of the neighborhood. That's a decision that this board will weigh among the other four. I do
But again-
understand what you're
But
saying.
again, the perimeter besides the street is not, is just from a 6 foot to an 8 foot fence. That's all we're here for, those 2 feet, really.
I
So
understand
it's not-
clearly what you're
Right.
here for.
It's not, we're coming in with a 2 foot fence or not allowed to put a fence, allowed to put a 6 foot fence essentially, presuming, with approval from the ARB, but allowed to put a 6 foot fence on the property. We're only asking for an 8 foot fence. It's not a 2 foot to 8 foot. It's not a nothing to 8 foot. It's 6 foot to 8 foot. It's the last 2 feet.
The fence is surrounding the whole property. And
That's-
like I said, I don't think that there's one, there certainly is not one in the park that's ever been approved,
A perimeter fence?
a perimeter fence.
But what I'm saying, the code allows for a perimeter fence.
At 8 feet.
Not at 8 feet.
Not at 8 feet, I agree, but it's only at 6 feet it allows it. We're only doing 2 more feet. That's not,
Well, so parts of it would be 4 and 6.
2 more feet is 33% actually, right? And 8 foot on 4 is, you're doubling it.
but I think when you go back to the character of the neighborhood, I don't know if 6 feet or 8 feet is gonna be even noticeable from the property that is where it's located off the road and on the common drive. And again, 4 feet to 8 feet, it's not, the intention of the code as I read it is the 4 foot fence is intended to be on the road. This is not on the road because there's no, the property comes off the common drive, which again is essentially seen by her, by my client, Ms. Delliner. And so it's a unique situation that I think should be treated that way. And it's really allowing for, should be allowed for 6 feet around the property and here for a variance for 8 feet.
So question, if we say, okay, great, perimeter fence, 8 foot, and understanding the uniqueness of this property, but are we setting a precedent then for somebody to come back and say, well, wait a minute,
Yes.
you approved it here, but you're not going to approve it here? And that sort of quote unquote neighborhood caveat, is that a strong argument that we're not necessarily setting a precedent here?
Okay, so
You see my
What-
question? I'm sorry.
Yes, I understand your question. So generally, setting a precedent, it's somewhat difficult for a board to set a precedent, all right, because every property is unique. However, variances are generally to be granted because of a unique part of the property or unique character of the property. So for example, variances are granted because there's a rock outcropping, or there's some other feature of the property that makes that variance, let's say, more necessary than not, and you don't set a precedent because that property is unique. And so that's why you set, you set you
rule.
gave them the variance. If there's not anything particularly unique, then you do run the risk of perhaps not necessarily setting a precedent. And I know I'm using some weasel words here, but the problem is that, okay, I have an interior property, it's flat, I want to plant bushes, I want to put up an 8 foot deer fence all around my property. My property is no different from the applicant's property. It's no, and a lot of people can say that. So now you would have to, if you decided to grant this variance, my recommendation would be that you would need to find some sort of unique qualities that would justify granting it here, but not necessarily granting it somewhere else. I don't know, there may be unique qualities, but it isn't just that.
So just as an example, that could be if they were asking for 6 feet in the back, but 6 feet also in the front, because the front of this property is unique, that would be a more unique situation than 8 foot around the entire perimeter.
Well, probably. That's not as simple a question to answer as it appears on the surface. Zoning boards are very wary of setting precedent. It's not easy to set precedent, but you can certainly create a situation where others will come in and say, there was nothing unique about that property. You granted a variance. I want to do the same thing. I want a variance. And why wouldn't you give it to me? So that's something to consider when you're analyzing this.
And people troll through the minutes to look and see what variance had been given. I mean, they go way back in history to see what variance has been given, and then come before us and say, well, you gave that variance in 1970 or something.
Mhm. Well, everything changes, but yeah.
Should we make a
But they
motion to
use
open the meeting to the
precedents.
public at this point in
Uh,
time?
Unless the board members have other questions.
I mean, we'll have our discussion afterwards. All right, I'd like to make a motion to open the meeting to the public.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public?
Good evening. My name is Dennis Lenchavere for the Public Advocate Podium. I almost always agree with your very learned village zoning board attorney. And I very seldom agree with my opposing counsel, but tonight I'm going to agree with my opposing counsel. This is not complicated. And in fact, the chairman, you hit it right on the head. Perimeter fences. I have a letter, it's a page and a half. I could read it, submit it. I can just summarize it. I'd like it to be part of the record. I have copies for everybody if you want it. The chairman, tell me how I
You
should.
can read it if you'd like.
Okay,
It's short. It's short.
very short. And I'm, as follows. Perimeter fences are prohibited in the village. I'm going to stop right there. The chairman's first point was a perimeter fence. This is a perimeter fence. It's meant to keep out deer. Not deer from the first 20 feet in or the first 10 feet in. It's meant to keep out deer. So your code at section 49-3, it says as follows, quote, perimeter fences are prohibited in the village, period. No person shall erect or cause to be erected a perimeter fence of any kind in the village, close quote, period. There's an absolute prohibition on perimeter fences. There is allowance for other types of fences. And you as a zoning board have jurisdiction to grant variances for non-perimeter fences. And your code at section 49-6 says, is I always say ZBA, but the BZA here in the village, the BZA, quote, can grant variances, quote, except for the construction of perimeter fences. So you can grant variances for non-perimeter fences, but not for perimeter fences. And there's a whole slew of cases, which just for the record, I gave your attorney. I'll be happy to give a letter copy to my respected opposing counsel tonight if he likes it.
Thank you.
And what the cases say basically is that, you know, there's no jurisdiction by this BZA. Why is that? Because the applicant is asking for a, quote, a variance from a village code provision, which is chapter 49. Your zoning is in chapter 100. So you as a BZA do not have the power to vary other code provisions. The Board of Trustees has that power. They can change the law, they can enact different laws, but you know, chapter 49 is very clear, as I cited, that perimeter fences are prohibited, period. And the cases I've given to opposing counsel right now and your respective village council are all there on point. You're a very attentive board. You have a lot of things you want to consider. I'll just sit down and say that, you know, if you have any questions, I'm happy to it. But I mean, you know, attorneys always claim we're right. I'm no exception, all right? And as your respected opposing counsel knows, I frequently insist that I'm right, even though I'm not sometimes. But this is one case where I know I'm right. no jurisdiction by this zoning board, BZA, on perimeter fences. Your code says it, chapter 49. Thank you very much.
Well, I've been waiting patiently with my hand up. If I can speak, it's John Sarcone.
Mr.
Yes.
Sarcone, you can speak.
Thank you. I represent adjoining property owners, and I submitted a comprehensive correspondence with illustrations. And of course, council for the board is picking through all of the variables. And we just heard from Council Lynch about the prohibited nature. And I cited that also in my correspondence. But you know, what we heard here from counsel for the applicant was a shoulda, coulda, woulda, and probably. Okay, we heard all of those words, and if you go back and listen, you'll hear probably. Probably there's deer. We should have done this, or we could have done that. We want to put plants, and we don't want to be eaten. The problem here is, and counsel for this board knows very well, because she's been doing this for a long time, that substantial evidence is required to meet the burden. If you get past the jurisdictional issue and you get past all the other obstacles and we get to the root of the application, there's no substantial, nothing. Council says, well, we want to keep the deer. Well, you know, there's a lot of deer here. There's a lot of woods. You know, my client doesn't have any deer droppings in his yard. I don't think he's ever seen any deer droppings in his yard. Okay. So unless she meets the burden of substantial have substantial proof, this application is dead on arrival. If it even rises to the level of where you have an opportunity to deliberate. And I'm sure your counsel will go back and she'll examine all of this and she'll be able to come back and properly advise. My request to this board is to adjourn this public hearing and give council an opportunity to weigh in with a full opinion, recommendation, and we can reconvene here at your next meeting or whenever you choose. Thank you very much.
If I may,
Anyone else in the public?
yes, please. I would appreciate if council wouldn't speak while I speak on their side. Chairman Lindsay and Chairman Ryan Lynch, thank you for letting me speak. I have a copy here of Local Law 49. And I don't know if you've got a chance to read it, but I'm going to distribute it to all of you so we can take a look at exactly what it says. I'm sorry. For you, Mr. Christensen, I'll read out loud. I'll try to enunciate my words well. Basically, Local Law 49 differentiates between an interior fence and a perimeter fence. Perimeter fence is a fence that either temporarily or permanently erected on or along the boundary of any lot line, including street line or the shoreline. Interior fence is any other fence that's not a perimeter fence. 49.3, prohibition regarding fences in general. Perimeter fences are prohibited in the village. No person shall erect or cause to be erected a perimeter fence of any kind in this village. I mean, it's just pretty simple language. 49-5 says, well, however, a secondary fence may be erected to a height of 8 feet. Well, that's what the applicant wants. However, no such fence, which is a secondary fence, shall enclose an area in excess of 35% of the lot upon which is erected, right? So there has to be a substantial setback on this 8-foot fence. And it says, secondary fence shall be constructed in a black plastic mesh material of a type, the deer fence that we see. Local Law 49
also has something interesting in it, which is a self-dissolving clause. If by a certain date in 2009, it self-dissolves. We take issue with this self-dissolving clause. We don't think that New York State, either town law or village law, allows for a local law to be self-dissolving. So we think this is still enacted. It's still valid. One. Two, an opposing counsel, interestingly, stated that there's a restriction on the property. The restriction says there's no fences because Pierre Lorillard wanted people to be good neighbors and not have any fences. And unfortunately, and in an odd way, opposing counsel stated, oh, but this restriction is between two property owners. That's a huge misstatement. That's a blatant misstatement. You know, I'm going to give you, now unfortunately, I have only one. This is an 1893 deed. It took me 8.5 hours to find, and maybe 5 hours to transpose because it's all written in script. And basically it says this indentured is made the 15th of April in the year 1893 between the Tuxedo Park Association and Maud Lorillard Taylor, who is the daughter of Pierre. And it's not between two landowners, it's between the Tuxedo Park Association. Tuxedo Park Association is the predecessor to the village of Tuxedo Park. So this restriction, which is on page 10, was put in by the Tuxedo Park Association, put in by the village of Tuxedo Park, not by a land between. So this restriction is between the village of Tuxedo Park and Ms. Dulliner. And the village cannot willy-nilly remove a restriction. There is a way to remove restrictions. It's very complicated. You have to reverse the transaction, remove it, and then redo the transaction. And I'll read the restriction. And it is further covenanted and agreed that no fence or fences shall be erected upon the premises hereby conveyed. It's a restriction from the village of Tuxedo Park on Ms. Dolliner's lot. Cannot be undone. Thank you.
If I could just,
Yeah.
if I could just address a few things. Yes, I believe that the last person who spoke got to the point of chapter 49, which was brought up at the end after all the discussion about what's in chapter 49 about perimeter fences is that the first paragraph of the chapter says the duration of this chapter is limited to the earlier of January 31st, 2009, or the effective date of a new local law. January 31st, 2009 has occurred. Therefore, this chapter, pursuant to its own provision, is no longer something that can be relied upon. So the chapter that can be relied upon is the one we're here dealing with, which is the one about fences, which allows the perimeter fences on the property to be 6 feet and 8 feet. Again, there's a lot of moving around, shell games and things coming in that don't may have. As far as deer on the property, your own village website, which is something that has a tab on it regarding deer, regarding the issue of deer. It has a link on it to the DEC website about how problematic deer are. This is not something that requires substantial evidence to say that there is deer in the property. Again, we've submitted photographs with the letter we submitted tonight. I'm sure you're all aware, I don't want to speak for you, I'm sure you're all aware that there are deer in Tuxedo Park. There is, again, something on the website that, your own village website, that links to the DEC that explains how problematic deer are. So that's not an issue. That's not an issue whether there are deer here or not. There obviously are. Again, 49 regarding perimeter fences, chapter 49, self-dissolved can no longer be relied upon. What we're dealing with, as I said at the beginning, is a variance, area variance for fence height. As far as the 1893 deed, which is very interesting but very hard to read, that's not for this board to decide. There's case law that presented in the new letter that shows that this board is here for the purpose, and you are designated under your village code to review matters. This is one of the matters for a variance, not whether between two different property owners or an owner claiming an easement over another property, wherever that easement was created. That's not for this board to decide. This board has just decided the area variances before it, which we've discussed previously.
Mr. Chairman, it's John Sarcone. If I can have a
One second,
rebuttal.
John, 1 second, please. The law that the council cited goes to the earlier of 2009 or 2 years, but then provides for an opportunity for the board to change the law. This law was not changed. This law, chapter 49, is still on the books.
Still valid.
If you go on the website, you'll see it. So to suggest that this law that's still on the books was repealed is a misstatement of fact.
It has a sunset clause.
What?
That law has a sunset clause. So I would like some time to review it, but my initial opinion is it is not valid. It's sunset.
Oh.
It has a self-executing end point.
I think it
So,
was written that way, at least that's what John showed me.
right. So, I mean, we can talk about this. I would like some time before you make your decision to look over what I've just been handed. I will make two statements. Generally, the law, chapter 49, is done unless I find evidence to the contrary or law to the contrary. I think a board of trustees has every right to sunset a local law. Okay. The second thing is, as I said before, the general rule is matters that are covenants, matters that are between two neighbors, it's not for this board. That's a private matter. It's taken up between the neighbors. I would like some time, though, to again consider the point that this was a provision put in by Tuxedo Park Associates, which no longer exists, as I understand. But just give me some time to think about it. There's a lot before this board. I'd like an opportunity to come to some legal conclusions so that I may advise you. The rest, of course, in terms of the 5 factors, that's completely up to you.
Thank you. What I just wanted to say as far as the bottom line here is if you do get to a point to make a determination, there is no substantial evidence. It's all hearsay. There is no proof that deer traversed through the applicant's property. There's no proof that shrubs were eaten, that bushes were eaten, that flowers were eaten, that anything is eaten. All it is let's put a fence up and hope the deer don't jump over it. But the DEC said they can. In their own exhibit, the DEC stated that deer can jump over an 8-foot fence. Council says, well, the fence company said it's probably going to work. So now this board is going to go in and grant a variance to somebody to see if it works when no other property has ever come in to this board for a variance, as we heard earlier. No one has ever come in for a variance of this kind for a perimeter fence. It is what it is. Take a look at what I wrote. This is nothing more than a spike fence. That's it. And that's not Tuxedo Park. Tuxedo Park does not have a history, a rich reputation of neighborly relations to have that there. And I'm sure that's why the boards had the wisdom to put in such a law. I'm not sure if it's sunsetted or not. I've done municipal law. I've written dozens of laws. I believe there has to be some mechanism that's built in that is approved in Albany. Okay, this isn't Congress where they have a resolution that sunsets. So I'm sure council will be able to look into it. We'll look into it ourselves. But in the end, this application does not have substantial proof as to why a variance is needed. Thank you.
Yes.
So I would like to address a couple of issues in here. I actually have a computer with me and we presented already pictures of deer on my property. I have more pictures, not only of the deer, but also bears. Mama bear with 2 cubs coming into my property and coming to the front door. So there is definitely an evidence. Now, at some point, Tuxedo Park, I don't know if it was Board of Trustees. I read the article, excuse me, very quickly today, but it was even in decision to spend $2 million to create the perimeter deer fence around the entire village. I could send you the references.
Many, many years ago.
Yeah, but it was still a problem, and it was something that it's not there, is not
A
here.
lot of that kind of happened before there was culling.
Right.
I mean, there are way less deer now than there used to be.
Yeah, I know. There are 2 deer drives actually every year to try to reduce the population of deer, and they are really pests. They destroy the vegetation. They also bring ticks. They also bring Lyme disease. So this is not a joke. And if several organizations say that 8 feet is minimal to protect my property and my life, that is something we are asking for. Also, just to address very, very quickly the deeds from 1893, there is actually just a very short quotation, and it's taken out of the context, that no fences are allowed. Before that, I actually have a text with me, if somebody is interested. Before that, he was talking about that that there should be no stables on several properties that are named, there are numbers, and they are on a map. There should be no stables, there should be no manufacturing of alcohol and selling of alcohol, and also there should be hunting ground, and hunting and fishing should be allowed only for Tuxedo Park members and nobody else. And hence, no fences are around because there were hunting grounds. Then there is a deed from 1921, which repeats basically all the things, right? Except there is nothing about hunting and there is no mention of the fences in. Just a short note.
You know, since she went twice, I'd like to present this to.
I didn't
This
go
is a
twice, I went only
1904
once.
deed, which is basically the same language, and they invented the typewriter. It's not misstated, it's not taken out of context. What we're trying to say really is allow Ms. Dalliner to bring us to the table as neighbors and come to some solution. We believe Chapter 49 still exists. We believe the sunset clause is not correct, it's illegal, and therefore, according to Albany, that the law is still valid. The valid law allows for an 8-foot fence, which is just on 35% of the property. Allow us to come to the table, Ms. Dalliner, and figure out what that 35% is. We've been trying to do that for 3 months now, and been rebuffed by Ms. Dalliner and by Mr. Council over here. Thank you.
Lise, where do we go from here?
I would strongly suggest that you adjourn. I'm gonna leave it up to the board. You could close the public hearing. It seems that everyone's had their say.
One more first, too.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. If the public hearing is still open, if
Yeah.
there are people who want to speak.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Conrad Roncati, Tuxedo Park Properties, adjacent property owner. Just for the record, I oppose a perimeter fence that's being proposed. I have read the requirements in the zoning ordinance. I am hearing for the first time that there's a proposition that the ordinance is not valid. Find that a little bit hard to believe. I read the sunset related language here. I need a little bit more time to look at that myself. I find it hard to believe that the village would leave this an open matter and let something sunset on an item that is of such importance to all the property owners. I've been before this board as a property owner, also as an architect. My last application, I actually referred to fence requirements in that last application, and there was no discussion that that was unnecessary. So I believe it is valid, as others have mentioned here this evening. I also heard that I think counsel for the applicant stated that, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I just arrived late, that the any private easements between or deed restrictions between property owners is of no moment or no merit to this board, and I find that very hard to believe. I practiced architecture for 35 years, primarily in New York and New Jersey, 17 other states. I've never seen a situation where an easement wasn't within the purview, scope, or influence of a board. And that is clear and unequivocal. Whether this matter of the definitions is valid or not, or been replaced or sunsetted, is actually of no moment. There is absolutely no allowance, no provision, and a prohibition specifically in the deeds against an 8-foot fence. As was mentioned here by my other neighbor, if the applicant would like to put up a fence on a smaller area around the confines of her home and driveway for protection, or, I certainly see that as being valid. But an 8-foot fence on the property line, which would impact my property, neighborhoods, and other cross easements that I am very much aware of, I think is a big problem, and I voice my opposition. I too have had some interaction, not directly with my neighbor, but through counsel. I've been accused of things in public and in public documents by my neighbor about the driveway that we share in common. I've offered solutions that were rejected, and I finally took it upon myself to actually improve that driveway at my own cost and expense. So I've been a good neighbor. I've been cooperative. I haven't stood in anybody's way. I certainly don't want people standing in my way on what I might choose to do with my property. But I think this is clear and unequivocal. I again just raise my objection to an 8-foot fence on the property. Thank you.
Is this better?
Why not?
Ladies and gentlemen, BZA, Gavin Maxwell, 86 Summit Road. I just wanted to be very brief and say that I think the fence itself is rather pointless. I'll leave that aside. I second Mr. Arcadi's remarks regarding the easement and its relevance here. I think there's actually some more fact finding that could be done there. And I would just simply say that in regards to the nature of the neighborhood and how we define the character of the neighborhood, I think we've had a lot of authoritative commentary about what the character of the neighborhood is. I do actually think it's, frankly, not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood, nor is it kind of an attractive feature of what we would entertain and would perceive.
You can close the public hearing, or you can adjourn the public hearing, and people could have an opportunity to say more next time. I think the people here have said have had their say. But it's up to this board. If you want to continue the public hearing, I would recommend that you not make a decision tonight, as I've spoken before. And you may want to keep the public hearing open until the next meeting.
Can I just ask Elise one question? Elise, if they do close the public hearing, will the board permit subsequent correspondence addressing this matter further? Because there has been some issues raised. The question of whether the Article 94, I think, is valid or sunsetted. We'd like the opportunity to brief that.
That's certainly something the board could do. I think if you have a request by a member of the public or their attorney for a period of time, maybe 10 days to accept written comments, or again, you can leave the public hearing open until the next meeting. It depends on what the board wants to do.
Just one question, please. I believe the applicant is going to submit a new map, as I heard it. That's different from what the board has, if I heard that correctly. And certainly we, people objecting to it, would want to see that map before final say-so is ended. So, I mean, that would be a different.
I think it would be best to keep the public meeting open.
That's fine.
Agreed?
Thank you.
So then you would just motion to adjourn the public hearing until the next meeting.
Yeah. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the.
Second.
Right?
Aye.
Got a lot of great legal minds here.
No one's better than you. No one's more than 30.
Definitely. I agree. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, yes.
Can we, just, I mean.
But we have to approve the minutes anyway. So we
Right,
have to
right,
make most
okay,
of it.
cool. Okay.
These gentlemen?
Okay.
Good.
It's just as a clear up is, everyone have a chance to look at the minutes to the last meeting? No?
No, I wasn't here.
Okay, well, I'll postpone that till the next time, okay? And I'll make sure that I'll send, Desiree sent a copy out.
Well, she did send it out.
Right, I'll resend it out before we wind up meeting
Yeah,
again.
she had to send it out. So.
So we're going to get a new map? We're getting a new map?
You were saying that you were going to set.
The new, with setbacks.
With a 5 foot.
The five-
Yeah, it's only on
Yeah, yeah,
one,
yeah.
one piece where the east road is.
Down here.
Do you want these here, or does it really make a?
We should have them for the rest of
Yeah, we absolutely should, yeah. Yeah, Dennis's letter.
Yeah,
as well.
so you just, yeah, I assume, because I heard a couple of different things right there. One scenario would be,
Gentlemen, we're still on
Yeah,
the
we're still
record,
on
and
the
I just
record.
want you to be
And-
aware of
And
this.
if
that's
you're
all.
going to discuss the application, that's fine. The applicant is here, but other people are gone. So,
I think it's more to discuss what's gonna be done in terms of the review before we come back, but
Can
we
we go into
don't have to.
executive session and do it that way?
that's not really a executive session purpose.
Okay.
If you're just talking about, when you're talking about procedure, like what happens.
No, I'm sort of, I'm seeing a couple of different scenarios, right? One would be, and I assume this legal research will help clarify this, but like, one would be say, okay, under one law, if the applicant came back with 35% of the property and an 8-foot fence, that would not require a variance.
It hasn't.
If it hasn't,
If it has a sunset, if it has a sunset,
Sunset.
that would require variance. Another would be if she came back with a perimeter fence that was 4 foot and 6 foot, that wouldn't require a variance. But if that law was still, and then it would. So I just want to make sure that we'll
That's
sort of
the-
clarify that one way or the
You're
other.
absolutely right. That's a threshold legal question. From my experience, you can certainly draft a local law that is of a finite duration. But I would like to look at.
Sure.
I'd be interested to see the legal briefs on
right,
that.
but
from the
it's also
attorneys.
kind of interesting too, is when this law was was written, I think the intent was that they didn't want perimeter fences. They wanted, if you were gonna put a fence up, they wanted that fence
Right.
just to protect the house and the plants.
Right.
Not the whole property.
But they let you put an 8-foot fence to do that.
And they let you put an 8-foot fence at the time.
Right.
So, when you look at what we might approve, if that was what you had done, we would have looked at that more
Yeah,
favorably.
Mr. Lindsay, actually, before we come in here, we went to the BAR, and they had no objection to the perimeter.
But they're not, that's it's different.
Yeah.
All right, it's a different, they're not concerned with the law. We're
They have
concerned
no
with the law.
authority to vary the law,
Okay.
so. So that doesn't really mean.
And do we care about the deed stuff or
Which,
the
deed.
The deed.
You know, that's like going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in Tuxedo
Yeah,
Park.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean, I've
there are,
looked- yeah.
like, I don't even know how you would, like,
Yeah.
because the, Tuxedo Park Association doesn't exist
Right, right.
anymore. And how does it get taken over and what, so that's a tough question.
So when
I would
we-
rather keep to the issue
Right,
of
so,
what
so
we
when
have
we
going
convene
on.
again, we'll have some readout on whether local 49 or whatever, I forget the
I'll
other.
have an opinion
the
on
opi-
that,
is-
as well as I'll take a look at the deeds and I'll take a look, but again, they're probably excerpts. It's, you would need a title expert to go through.
Right, you
from
would
the
have to,
very
exactly.
beginning to
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
so it's a
At
rabbit
least we
hole.
have a title expert. We'll prepare it for you.
That's fine. But again, I'll be interested in looking at that.
there was something else actually. Is a provision that allows no easement, that restricts ingress and egress of any vehicles on that part of the property. So there can be no easement. It's a restriction.
We're not worried about that.
We were talking about easement and other stuff.
I think the operative question is 49 still in.
Right, that's the
Yeah.
first one. Is it 49 still in effect at all? Okay.
And you have limited, if it's in effect, you have very limited ability. You do have the authority to vary it, but not to the extent of the perimeter fence. So that's the threshold question.
Then the applicant could go back with 35% and
If
8
it's
foot.
still in effect, they could
Right.
do that. That's right.
I have another question, please. People started talking here about a new map. I'm wondering if actually I should go through all the motions, paying the engineer, paying everybody else on the team, to change just one number on a very small area of the map. Instead of 2 feet, put 5 feet on the East Summit Road. Would it be totally necessary or can we forgo?
Well, you could modify the existing one as a submittal.
Yeah.
You mean by hand just to do?
Yeah,
it?
you could circle it and just put 5 feet and that
Okay,
would be.
That would be fantastic, because I don't really want to go to the engineer, find, so
No,
he
no, no,
will
no,
find
no.
line.
If it's
and
a
I-
certain thing, you could, have it, you could sign it, all right, correct? You could sign
Yeah, I
it.
mean, it would just be something that, were the board to approve the variance, then I would require like a map note. I would, if they were to approve the variance, then I would suggest that you submit a new map to be filed, okay? But at this point, at this stage, I do agree that I don't think it's necessary to expend the money to have the engineer or the surveyor or whoever to do that.
Yeah, because
Just
we are talking
just
about-
circle it, make a note. The board will take that into consideration. If they approve your application and grant the variance, you'll submit a new map. That'll be a condition.
Okay. Because we are talking like $10,000 extra.
Yeah, no
Well,
point.
Yeah, I'd rather, I'd rather not. If I don't have. to.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
do you want to see the video of the bears?
I've seen bears. I got bears in my
Did we-
backyard.
did we
Have
adjourn-
you there
did we
either?
adjourn the meeting? Did we adjourn the
Did
meeting?
you-
Yeah,
Or
I
just the
you
minutes?
approve the
returned to
minutes?
public session, now let's
Oh.
adjourn the meeting.
Okay, you approved the minutes, right?
Oh, we didn't
No,
approve
we
the minutes.
didn't,
We
because
didn't get a
nobody
chance.
read
We
them.
did not approve the minutes.
Sorry, how do I go about
Nobody
it?
read
Do I
them.
collect the copies and do it on each one?
No,
Or
just submit one.
Submit one
Just
copy.
submit one copy?
Yeah, submit one to John.
Submit one copy to me.
Would you happen to have a copy?
I'll make one available.
Thank you.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
So,
Aye.